In this case, I am firmly of the view that the rule of six makes absolutely no sense.
It makes no sense at all. And I think that's why a lot of people are breaking the COVID rules. We know that only around 10% of people are adhering to quarantine rules because they don't make sense to people. And lots of people can't afford to adhere to them as well. I just think, what kind of country have we become when a TV presenter has to issue a groveling public Stalinist style apology simply for saying she wants to celebrate Christmas with her family? This is how crazy and authoritarian COVID Britain has become. I don't think she should have apologized. I think she was saying something that many, many people are thinking, including me, which is that on Christmas Day, we will do what we want. We will mix households. We will do it safely. We will do it in a sensible way, but we will not refuse to visit family on the basis of rules drawn up by diktat, which none of us have been able to discuss or analyze. I think a lot of people are going to do that. I plan to do it. And I actually think there's nothing the government can do about that.
Well, indeed. And Mike, some of the rhetoric that you're using, I think, is equally as damaging potentially because you say, oh, don't worry, Victoria's family members will be able to be vaccinated next year. Well, we don't know that, Mike. We don't know for sure that there's going to be an effective vaccine that is going to protect the elderly. And I've heard from many elderly members of our community, many heroes of our community, Mike, who say the one thing that is most likely to keep them alive is having some contact with their family, because the thing that's killing them, Mike, is actually this enforced separation over many, many months, which is becoming inhumane.
I'm not saying it's any fun to be isolated, and I speak to
Well, it's not about what's
with
fun, it's about
relatives
what's
of mine.
humane.
It's about what's going to keep people alive is the bottom line. And of course, there need to be rules in place that enable elderly relatives to see other people. And indeed, even in Scotland, where rules are now fairly strict, elderly relatives are still allowed to see family members. But the rule of six there is there because scientists have recommended that it's there to keep as many people alive as possible. Now, unless you know better than SAGE or the other scientists that are involved in this, then I would suggest that you follow the rules, or maybe find out a better rule. But no one suggested a better rule. All I've heard so far on this call from you guys is lots of complaining about rules by diktat put in place, might I add, by a government that I would imagine that you both support and wanted to get elected at this time last year. So unless you've got a better rule, I would suggest that you follow the rules that are there
But
rather
Brendan,
than create public confusion.
well, let's let Brendan respond. But Brendan, this is the sort of groupthink, I think, which is becoming incredibly damaging. If you question rules that are not backed up by science, by the way, like the 10 p.m. curfew and the rule of six, not backed up by any science, you're somehow being irresponsible. And I think, Brendan, actually, you're being irresponsible if you blindly follow authoritarian rules without questioning them.
Absolutely. I think dissent and questioning and criticism and debate become more important in a time of crisis rather than less important. It's incumbent upon all of us as citizens in a democracy to constantly ask questions about these new rules and regulations and about what's being enforced on us. That's our duty as citizens. The idea that we should all just nod along and go along with every single rule, that strikes me as utterly bizarre. And that's not what it means to be a genuine, active citizen. The truth is, people are not following the rules very much. And the reason they're not following the rules is not because they're stupid, not because they think COVID is a fake disease, not because they disbelieve all science all the time. They're not following the rules because they are making people's lives incredibly difficult and incredibly unpleasant. I think, Dan, you're absolutely right to raise the question of the isolation of old people, which is having a devastating impact on many old people's lives. We've heard about people with senile dementia who feel like that they've been abandoned, who cannot understand where their family has disappeared to. The idea that these people should be forced to spend Christmas alone strikes me as absolutely horrifying. And Jefferson once said, when a law is wrong, then it falls to people to find a way around it. And I think in a case in which there is a possibility that old, lonely people will be left alone on Christmas, I think people are absolutely right to find a way around that in any way that they can.
And Mike, surely there are ways to do things that are responsible. And if elderly folk are allowed to go on a tube train in London or a bus in Manchester, it doesn't really make any sense that they're not allowed to see their relatives on a small group on Christmas Day. By the way, Mike, I'm very much like Victoria Derbyshire. I think we should follow all the sensible measures, temperature checks, appropriate social distancing. But I think we have to start trusting people to make sensible, common sense decisions.
I mean, on one level, I agree with both of you in that I think that the rules that are in place don't always make sense, and they're not always clear, and they've been changed so many times over the past few months that I don't have any quarrel with people finding them confusing or not knowing what the rules are necessarily in their area or at any given time. So I have a lot of sympathy with people being confused. And of course, I have sympathy with people who want to spend time with their family. But the rule of 6 actually is one of the rules that is clear, and the reasoning behind it is clear. The more people you have together, particularly in an enclosed space, the more dangerous it becomes. So as far as I'm aware, that's the rule that will be in place at Christmas unless it is changed. And that's the rule that we will be required to obey. And at no point has the government said this is optional. And just the same as we live in a law-abiding country and we're all expected to obey the law at all times, this will be a law that will be in place on Christmas Day, and we will be expected to obey it. And we all know the reasons why.
Have you ever smoked marijuana before, Mike?
No, I haven't.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it. Thought I'd trick you out there.
It was a good try, to be honest. There were other ones you could have gone for, but that one I can say no.
Have you ever sped?
I have, indeed.
Okay. Well,
I was breaking the law at the time, and I've been caught for it as well.
Okay, well, I think some people will take that same sort of risk on Christmas Day. Mike Buckley, the journalist, and Brendan O'Neill, the editor of Spiked Online, thank you so much for having that debate. What do you think after Victoria Derbyshire was forced to apologise? Will you defy the rule of 6 to spend Christmas with your family? First results of our poll are in. 81% of you saying you will. Just 19% of you saying you will follow this rule.